So it's been about 6 to 7 months since Joker Folie A Duex has come out to theaters, and some people have said it's the worst movie of 2024, and some people have said it's the worst movie that has ever come out, which really kind of baffles me. But anyways, the night I did see it, I made a little review on my YouTube channel and just talking about the experience, because it was one of my most anticipated movies. You know, Joker, the first one, was one of my favorite movies that's come out in the recent years, and I was really looking forward to the second one. I think in my review I was mentioning I was kind of really confused about the movie, just how I felt. I felt very mixed. You know, I loved certain parts and I hated certain parts. And I think just kind of like my raw review it was a blurred image, because, you know, going into the theater almost completely blind, you know, I saw a few trailers and stuff, but I wasn't really sure how this movie was going to go. I was trying to avoid a lot of spoilers. I was trying to avoid a lot of marketing for the movie, just because for every movie I just try to see it completely blind as possible. And I just feel like the movie just kind of threw a lot at us. There was a lot of music involved. There was a lot of you know, different plot elements. You know, the story was going in a different direction than I expected. There was a lot of unnecessary scenes or scenes didn't play out normally, or it just ended up being weird, and I just I was very confused on the entire thing. But for the last few months, I've been, you know, just thinking about it on the back burner, just thinking about it, thinking about certain scenes, because like I said before, I do love certain parts of it. You know, the music was really great. You know, certain scenes in the prison with Arthur and Lee, and, you know, them getting away, them escaping, certain scenes in court, those were great. And I just kept thinking about those scenes, because for the longest time, I wanted to see this movie again, but I was just kind of waiting for kind of the perfect moment to just give enough time to breathe, where I can go watch with it with fresh eyes and just kind of go back and see how it's changed the last, like, you know, 6 to 7 months. So, you know, I thought might as well, you know, it's been 6 to 7 months, like I just said, and, you know, this was like last week or whatever. I just thought, hey, might as well, let's watch it again, because why not? I think I'm in like the middle of my making my own short film, and I had a little bit of breezeway. I had a little bit of a gap, a week where I had like nothing to do. I was fully prepped, and I was like, let's just like watch Joker again, just to see how I feel about the movie. And you know, watching it again, I watched it over 2 days, because it was kind of a long movie, you know, 2.5 hours. I watched it on HBO Max or whatever. And honestly, like, I actually really liked it. I liked it even more than the first time. And overall, the movie was more solid. It was more, because obviously, like, going into it, I knew what to expect. I knew how it was going to end. I knew how certain scenes were going to go. So obviously, there was no surprises, because, you know, I'll get to this later on in the review, but, you know, obviously that first viewing was very jarring, a lot of unexpected twists, especially towards the ending, which didn't really fit with me, you know, the first time watching it. But second time around, like, I knew where I was going, I knew how this movie was going to end, so I was more clear. And I think, you know, just kind of like the message of the movie is something I was very confused about when I was watching it for the first time in the cinemas, because for me, you know, for a story to make sense, for a movie to be good or bad, or however I see it, there always needs to be a good message at the end. I think, like, especially with themes, especially with story characters, there always has to be some sort of like learning curve, or, you know, obviously message for our heroes or villains. That's what we want from a movie, is to see them grow, see them, you know, at the end of the day, change. And I think Joker had like a message in there, but I think on the first viewing, I was kind of mixed. I was kind of like confused, because, like I said, there was a lot of elements, a lot of music, a lot of like crazy stuff. Lady Gaga was coming in, the guards were beating his ass and, you know, slapping his dick around and shit. And, you know, just so many different scenes. But anyways, like, getting to kind of like, you know, the review of this movie, because in certain parts I do really like. I really like how this movie was, you know, a sequel to, you know, obviously the Joker, but I really like how they made the Joker into this like kind of celebrity in prison kind of story. And it was very interesting, because we never really seen anything like this before, you know, like Shawshank Redemption or whatever that movie's called. I've never seen it, but I know it's like a prison story. It kind of reminded me of like that, because, you know, obviously the whole movie is basically him in prison. And we're seeing Arthur in kind of a different light. You know, this is years after he became the Joker. And I really like how they made him into a TV star. You know, this person that we see on TV, you know, committing all these crimes, doing all this stuff. The people in Gotham like really look up to Joker, like this character, this icon for years during these two movies. It was really interesting to see, you know, people like Lee, people like, you know, like his fans and stuff, really like be into kind of like the progression, the saga of the Joker. And I think it kind of mirrored like how we as kids, you know, we watch Batman, you know, Adam West, or you know, those TV shows, those cartoons. We watch those cartoons, Batman saving the day, you know, beating up the Joker, beating up the Penguin, and I kind of mirrored, you know, the beginning first scene of this movie where it kind of starts out in the Looney Tunes kind of animated stuff, which I absolutely love that scene. That scene was really gold because it made Joker kind of like this TV star that, you know, like I said before, people looked up to. In the first movie where he's a stand-up comedian, he's on Murray Franklin. We're seeing all these like kind of murders happen from like this killer clown, you know, person. Who is this guy? And then he comes out on Murray Franklin as the Joker. And over a few years, we see him, in prison. Oh, he's escaping with this girl, and they're singing and dancing while they're burning down Arkham Asylum. And then he's got a movie that's come out, a real-life movie based off his life. And then, you know, we see like the interviews, you know, the documentary where he goes up, he sings on TV, he sings to Harley Quinn on TV, and we see him in court yelling and screaming and pointing around, look at all these people, look around, as he talks to Gary, his old co-worker. Like all those scenes, like it just screams Joker, like especially with like the singing on TV, dancing, burning Arkham Asylum, making a scene in the courthouse. That is such like a Joker like kind of moment. And what I really love about these two movies is like Arthur Fleck really is the Joker. Like there's not one other actor, like, you know, obviously Heath Ledger, Jared Leto, everyone has their certain interpretation of the Joker, but this one was so perfect. This one was like, it was so unique, like the costume, it comes down to the performance, the acting. It was all so well done, especially with like Joaquin Phoenix, which does like an amazing job. He probably is like one of the best working actors to date. Joaquin Phoenix is probably one of the best living actors to date. He does such a great performance. And there was a line in the movie where like Harley Quinn's like, no, like he's perfect as a Joker. You're like, you can't get any more perfect than that. And that is so true with especially this interpretation in these two movies. Like the people really saw Arthur as the Joker. And throughout these movies, like I said before, people saw him on TV, you know, the interviews, Murray Franklin, they all had kind of this like interpretation of the Joker being like this crazy guy, like, wow, like look at this guy. This guy's like insane. And he's like making a scene in the courthouse, going on in documentaries and stuff. But what I really find interesting is, you know, dynamic between the Joker and Arthur. Because throughout this movie, and this is one of my things I really love about this one, is kind of a struggle between his two identities. He's known for this like this icon, the Joker, this character that he kind of accidentally created, and he has like no idea like what to do with it or like who he is really. For the most part, like in most of this movie, he is Arthur. He is kind of, you know, himself. And I think that's why a lot of people didn't really like this movie, is because this is more of like an Arthur Fleck story than a Joker story. But that's also with like the first one. You know, first one had like 10% of the Joker, and this one had like 20% of the Joker. But the thing is, like, when we have Joker in this movie, it's the Joker. Like, especially with like the musical aspects, the crazy scenes, it just screams Joker. Like, it doesn't get any more crazier than that, especially what the Joker's mean scene where he's going around the courthouse, kind of in his imagination, shooting the cameras, you know, slamming Harvey Dent with the chair, going up on stage and beating the judge with the sledgehammer. That is like such a Joker moment. And we have like so many great scenes in this movie like that. One other thing that was kind of alarming to people is that this movie is a musical, and obviously like I already knew that going into it, and I stood by this like standpoint. Like I have agreed and I stood by that Joker 2 being a musical has been a great idea. I thought, like, especially when it was announced years ago, I thought like, wow, this is actually like a unique, crazy turn. What a creative like avenue, what a creative like way to go about the sequel, is just to make it a musical. And I think like the way they did it, I think the first time I watched it in the theaters, I was kind of like, I enjoyed some of it, but then it got a little bit too over the top. Second time around, it felt more grounded. I feel like the songs and like kind of like the performances, especially with Lady Gaga, Joaquin Phoenix, they do such a great job no matter what. The acting in this movie is incredible. Not with just those two, but all the characters. The guy who played the Jackie in the prison, the lawyer did such a great job. You know, the guy who played Gary, he did a great job as well. The acting in all these movies has been really incredible. I think for the first one, you know, obviously it was just Joaquin mostly for like 99% of it. But I think for this one, they really developed like the second and the background characters, which I really liked. I really like how this one had, you know, different faces, especially with Harley Quinn, which doesn't get too much character development in this movie. But it kind of just makes sense because in the end of the day, she's just a crazy fan who just wants to marry the Joker. And that's really all that she's ever been in, you know, the comics, you know, other TV shows and other forms of media. Is she's just been like this crazy bitch who's just like on Joker's ass and just wants to, you know, destroy his life, just wants to, you know, kind of take the glory. And that's exactly what she does in this movie. She breaks his heart at the end of the day. No matter how this movie was going to go, I think she was always just going to like break Arthur's heart at the end of the day, is because she is Harley Quinn. You can't trust her. You can't trust the Joker either, but Arthur is more Arthur than the Joker himself. I think it was really tragic, you know, especially towards the end of this movie, where we see Arthur trying to become the Joker, this person that he's always kind of envisioned himself to be. He wishes he can, you know, take over the courtroom, you know, kill a bunch of people, you know, shoot the cameras and stuff. He wishes he can be that, and when he tries to become that, it kind of undoes itself very, very quickly, and we see him really struggle to become that person that he wishes to be. And I thought that was really perfect. I really thought, like, you know, I was disappointed we didn't get more of like the actual Joker when I was first seeing it, but second time around watching it, I realized like how perfect and tragic it was, you know, just Arthur wishing that he was this crazy guy when at the end of the day, he's not. He's really just like this normal guy who got into some trouble. You know, there was a line actually in the movie where like he said like, oh, there's this one guy who said like, oh, I think he's faking his mental illness. And I think the first one was about mental illness and how people in society don't treat people nicely with, you know, certain disorders. But I got to thinking like, wait a minute, was he making up this whole thing? Does he have this crazy imagination? You know, did he actually get beat up? Like, what is this? And you know, we see kind of like his backstory with like the courtroom scenes. Like I said before, I absolutely love the courtroom scenes. And we see him like with the sexual and like, you know, trauma and stuff where like, you know, he's getting beat up by his dad and shit. And very like dark stuff. And I think like they said before, someone said, I think the lawyer said like he created this character to go back inside like his imagination and just, you know, which really at the end of the day, the lawyer was really just making a bunch of bullshit about this, like, you know, split personality. There's two sides, Joker and Arthur. And I really love also like Arthur's being torn between all sides. Like his lawyer's telling him to do one thing and then Lee's telling him to do another thing. And then, you know, people around him, his fans, you know, the courtroom, the news, the media, the prisoners, his prison friends, everyone's telling him to be something different. And I love, and I wish the movie showed more of that, but I feel like I really understood that second time viewing. I really saw like, yeah, everyone's trying to have their own interpretation of the Joker, how he should be, how he should dress, like what he should do in each courtroom scene. And like, you know, especially for Lee just wants him to be this crazy guy. And at the end of the day, he was not able to. Like, you know, he felt bad for, you know, traumatizing his best friend, Gary, his coworker. And then just seeing him in court, and he almost cries because he realizes like, holy shit, like I actually like did affect Gary pretty badly. You know, he couldn't protect himself when he fought against the guards and, you know, in Arkham Asylum, and they beat his ass and they tore his clothes apart and, you know, fucked him or whatever. And, you know, especially at the end of the scene where they kill one of his friends in prison. And then at that moment, he realizes like, yeah, anyone who follows me on this path of becoming this like crazy guy, this crazy Joker, it's only going to lead in death. It's only going to lead in like kind of suffering, especially for me. I'm going to suffer. People around me are going to suffer. Do I want that for Lee? Do I want that for, you know, my fans? Do I want that for anyone really? What was the point of all this? Why did I become the Joker in the first place? What am I doing with my life? And that's why I love the next scene after this so perfectly, where he comes and he kind of confesses like, yeah, there is no Joker. Like, you know, I'm just Arthur. There's nothing here. I'm not this crazy guy that you guys think I am. I can't be, you know, this wild guy. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for killing all these people. I think the first time viewing, I was kind of disappointed because I really want to see that crazy Joker, obviously, that we saw before with the sledgehammer, you know, killing Murray Franklin and stuff. But that was not best for Arthur, because Arthur, at the end of the day, like I said before, was just this normal guy who got wrapped up in some bullshit. You know, he killed a few people in accidents. He accidentally created this icon that people looked up to, and then it just goes from there. And then, you know, it's just one step forward, and then two steps backwards. I find the whole story very, very tragic. But anyways, like, especially when it comes to the end where, you know, his followers are leaving him. Harley Quinn leaves the courtroom, and kind of everyone's just disappointed with Arthur for not being this crazy guy that we all interpret him to be. I think that kind of mirrors the audience also. We wanted him to be this crazy guy. We wanted him to, save the day. We wanted him to get the girl, kill a bunch of people, and, have this crazy, musical aspect, kind of like his imagination, what he's always imagined. We see throughout this movie where he, like I said before, gets the girl, saves the day, and he dances into happily ever after. They get married and stuff, but that's just not realistic. That's not what the story was about. And really, at the end of the day, these two movies are about this guy ended up in some trouble. Did he have a mental illness? Yes, a little bit, but he's not this super crazy guy like some other people, like Heath Ledger's Joker, Jared Leto, other versions of the character. This is really just a normal guy. And I think, we saw the Joker rise up in Joker 1, and then Joker 2 is this kind of fluctuation. Oh, is he going to rise up? And then it just comes down, and it doesn't make the movie bad. It just makes it tragic. And I think this movie is really beautiful like that. And especially when it comes to the ending where courtroom blows up as kind of like the symbolization that like the Joker's over, and he runs away, he gets chased by some fans. And at the end where we go to the Joker stairs, kind of mirroring where Joker started and where Joker is ending, kind of the story within Arthur, the Joker with him and then the Joker without. And I love how you see kind of like his face and his makeup like kind of fade away as like the scene in the courtrooms go throughout, especially when he wipes it off and then like explosion happens, he's all dirty and stuff, kind of as a symbolization like, yeah, the Joker icon is destroyed. Obviously Harley Quinn breaks up with him, and I think I was really mixed with the ending, because we're gonna get the ending here in a second, because basically he lost the trial, he lost everything, he lost love of his life, and then he's the next day in prison. He's already gonna die because he got the death sentence, and then one of his buddies comes up to him, he tells him the joke, and then he says, you get what you fucking deserve. He stabs him, and then he fucking dies, and that is the end of the Joker. And really, when I first time I saw that, I was just like, oh, like why? I even said that in my first review, like I could not believe that actually happened. But second time around, like I actually think it's very, very perfect, because like I said before, all these people who looked up to the Joker icon, and then they all kind of like wanted to be him or be close to him, kind of like Lee, kind of like with all these fans and stuff. People in Gotham are dressing up as him. They're dressing up, especially the people who save him at the courtroom. They dressed up as him, like they wanted to be him. And no matter what, Arthur will always be the first Joker, but the ending also shows there's always going to be more. There's always going to be more crazy people who are going to take his place. And I find that so tragic and so beautiful also. That's, in the first one, Arthur looked up to Murray Franklin as kind of like the sense of warmth. Seeing him on TV gave him a sense of comfort, watching him every day with his mom and stuff, and then being betrayed by him, and then realizing it at the end of Joker 1, he kills him. And that's exactly what happened with this inmate. This inmate saw, Arthur Fleck in prison, and then he looked up to him during his TV interviews, on the news and stuff. And then he was disappointed when he gave up that Joker persona. We actually see a clip of him, a clip of the prisoner when Joker is giving that speech and stuff. And we just see like the guy who actually does a great job acting. We see him like kind of like really fade into this realization, like, holy shit, like, oh fuck, this guy's serious. He kind of broke my heart. And then he kills Arthur. And I think that's just like a perfect like circle of life kind of thing. And it kind of resembles this ending of the Joker, but there's always going to be possibilities for the future ones, of course, because Gotham is in this set of fire. Arthur accidentally brought it to its knees in Joker 1. The city is on fire, people are rioting and stuff, and we still see that in Joker 2. And another reason why I think this ending is so perfect is because I feel like, for me going in, secretly I did want Arthur to, have a good ending. I think I really wanted him to see him and Lee get away and, just start a new life. Just kind of how he imagined and how he really wanted it to be. The trial to be over, the Joker persona over, and him just to have a happily ever after. And that's really what I really wanted from this movie. And I think I was just disappointed that it wasn't happening. But let's be real. This movie was always going to end with him dying, and always going to have like this tragic ending. Like, honestly, did you really think like Arthur would get away? Arthur would get, set off into happily ever after, him to have a good ending. No, obviously not. He killed people, he's in prison. There is no happily ever after for this character. No matter, like, you know, if he redeems himself at the end or not, waking up the Joker persona with him again throughout this movie, we see him kind of like firing his lawyer, then he becomes, you know, trying to become this character. When he does that, he kind of puts himself into kind of like this bottomless pit where he can't get out of. Now he's fucked. He's basically got no end. And let's say he actually did become the Joker at the end of this movie. Let's say he actually put on the makeup, he shot a bunch of people, he said, fuck you, I'm the Joker, ha ha ha, let's go. I feel like it was going to always end the same way. Lee was going to break up with him no matter what, because Lee, whichever way, she's a manipulator. So whatever she says during the movie, you can't ever trust her. And I think that's interesting, but it just adds for flat character development, which I think is kind of a missed opportunity, because Lady Gaga is really great in this movie. You know, her few scenes showcase, you know, her music, her acting skills. She did a great job, but it just didn't have much character development throughout. And I feel like Joker was always just going to end up getting shot or stabbed by anyone. He was going to, you know, he's got crazy fans out there. He was going to get shot by another motherfucker. Maybe that guy who was dressed up as Joker, maybe he shot him. He would have shot him. Anyways, like, any certain outcome this movie would have had, it would have ended the same way, really, if, like, this guy Arthur, if he became the Joker, if he was going around killing people, it would end it the same way. And I think that's a really great realization, because you realize at the end, like, he did kind of redeem himself. You know, obviously, I don't know if he's going to go to heaven or hell, but depending on, like, you know, his ending, like, his ending really matters, is because he really accepted himself as Arthur. He became normal once again. He didn't really try to pretend to be someone that he's not. And I think at the end of the day, that's the message of the movie. Really becoming true to yourself. Who are you really? And then don't let anyone else kind of tell you who you are. I really like that message. It's kind of a secret message within there, because the movie doesn't directly tell you that. It's just kind of like my own interpretation of the film and the genre and, you know, the certain aspects of the movies, because we see Arthur, you know, going in and out of the Joker, realizing that it's not for him. He's not meant to be this character. He's not meant to be this icon. And then he's not letting his fans, he's not letting Lee, he's not letting the lawyer, the judge, Gary Puddles, you know, the guards, really tell him at the end of the day what he wants to do. And at the end of the day, it was his choice to give up the Joker. And I really like that. I really like that. You know, getting sexually assaulted or whatever. I think, you know, Gary Puddles and what's his name, Ricky, getting killed in prison. Those two acts alone would have, like, set him off no matter what. Getting sexually assaulted was just like a fucking slap to the face from the guards. And I hope they burn in hell for that. But anyways, this movie was great. I really liked it. The musical aspects were great also. I did actually see a YouTube video about why the musical aspects were great. I think I'll link it in the description if I can, but it's a recent video that came out. I think, like I said before at the beginning, a lot of people didn't like this movie. Yeah, I feel like people didn't like this movie because it had, like, a lot of musical aspects in it. But in that video I watched, it actually explained, like, the lyrics and stuff very well. And actually, like, it showed, like, showcased how Arthur was singing about Lee and singing about love, singing about himself. But we see Harley Quinn sing about herself, only her. And I think that was kind of interesting. That's kind of an interesting video, so I'll link in the description. But really, I love to see the love for this movie, because I think it deserves it. A lot of people were hating on it, especially when it first came out. But this is when I didn't really know my stance on the movie, how it was going to go and stuff, and how I felt on it. But really, second viewing around, thinking about it for the past few months, I really like it. I really like Joker Folie A Duex. You know, obviously it's not a perfect movie, but I think it's better than a lot make it out to be. And it has a great message at the end of the day. Very tragic, as both of these movies are very, very sad and dark, obviously, but it makes for good content. It's very realistic. It's a very realistic approach. And it took the musical genre in a new light, and I really like to see that. It's probably the darkest musical I've ever seen. Only other thing I was just kind of thinking about also that kind of bugs me is, you know, the budget for this movie was $200 million. The first one was $50 million, and then they kind of 4 times it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the fact that they just kind of burnt money just to burn money. Like, for me, you probably have seen my channel. Like, I've been making short films and, you know, other filmmaking stuff and making feature films. I've been doing a lot of researching on budgeting, how to get a good budget, what do you need. I think you know, especially for a lot of Hollywood movies recently, movies are becoming more expensive and really just throwing money out there just because. Todd Phillips really gave them like kind of the middle finger because they gave him $200 million and Todd Phillips was like, oh, all right, I'll take that. But like really, it could have been 50 million. They burnt money just to burn money, really. They probably bought like, you know, a few luxury trailers. They probably decked it out with like furniture and stuff. Probably got steak and eggs every day for lunch and dinner. Really, they couldn't have burnt money any worse because there's only 2 locations in the movie. There's the courtroom and there's the prison. The first one has like 1 million locations. You know, they're going around the town and stuff. Here, there's 1 explosion. I think the actors, you know, got paid pretty handsomely, but the money went really nowhere. That was my only complaint. It's nothing too major, but the fact that it did worse in the box office, like really it could have been $50 million for the scope, the budget. There was no real reason. They just burnt money just to burn money, but that's neither here nor there. But I just kind of find that kind of interesting since I'm just kind of, you know, researching how to budget future movies, you know, especially how to make a profit out of a movie. This movie then made $0 and it kind of lost money actually, which is kind of sad, but you know, that's the way it kind of goes sometimes. It's a hit or miss kind of industry with some. But yeah, anyways, thank you again for watching. I'm making short films on this channel. I'm currently making one now. I'm looking forward to it. So if you are interested in my filmmaking journey, I'm definitely gonna make more movies better than this. Like I said, Joker 2 is not a perfect movie, but I think it's better than a lot make it out to be. My movies are gonna be way better. It's gonna have a clear image and it's not going to have a bunch of bullshit. It's not going to be overspent. But I hope people will like it overall. Anyways, subscribe for more. I do podcasts also once in a while, talk about films, talk about Hollywood, stuff like this, film school, film journey and stuff like that. I'm looking forward to making more content in the future. Subscribe if you're new. Yeah, and also like these 2 movies have been like really inspirational. They gave a new light to filmmaking. I think I've learned a lot through. I really like both movies, but I also like learned a lot behind the scenes. You know, the making of Joker 1 was completely different from making of Joker 2, which is really interesting to see, especially when it comes to budgeting, when it comes to, you know, the scope of everything, the post-production. I just find all that very interesting, especially when it comes to certain movies. But these 2 movies have been really interesting. I really love the journey. I love seeing Arthur. I love, you know, the characters with them in these 2 stories. And I think it's way better than most, you know, make it out to be. I said that already a million times, but whatever. Anyways, thank you again for watching. This is kind of a long video, but hopefully you enjoyed. With that being said, hope you have a good one. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.